Move it around a bit. Sometimes I used to help people with understanding their feelings of loss, and anybody connected with the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous is very, very understanding about loss. Loss of their best friend often, which was alcohol, and not being able to utilise it again, because if we try again we're probably going to find ourselves back in the same old mess that we always were in. That is, completely powerless over alcohol, life unmanageable, and most things going very, very sour very quickly. And I also used to be involved in helping people with dealing with loss of their loved ones, or loss of relationships. And it doesn't matter which way it is, something is happening inside us, and it's sometimes easier if we know what is going on to share how other people recognise loss. And there was a lady called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote in the 90s about what it was like to be dying, actually, and how loss felt. And I don't know where all the information came from, but a sort of chart emerged, which I borrowed and used, and I don't know whether it was she personally who came up with this, but it's been around for a long time and is used by grief counsellors. So I've had to do a bit of drawing beforehand so I can try and get this on the screen. So what we have here is titled Feeling Loss, and on the one dimension here we've got self-esteem going upwards like that. So generally, self-esteem there, we have a place of sort of acceptance and so on around how we are and what we're up to. And through time we can feel differently about events in our lives which we are grieving, and they could be loss of a loved one, loss of a friend, loss of a relationship, loss of a career, and alcohol, drugs, you name it. We feel something around it. So the assumption is really that our self-esteem goes down, and sometimes our ego comes out when we're feeling loss. But generally what happens is we get to a place of, I can't believe it first. It's like when my dad died. I knew it before he was dying that it was going to happen, but I was in denial about it. And what denial did for me, it made me push my self-esteem up a little bit in order to cope with what I was trying to deal with, which was something I found completely unacceptable. And as time went on, anger came around, and I felt angry about the fact that he wasn't going to be there much longer, and frustration and depression. And the frustration was I could do nothing to help. I couldn't change what was going to happen. And I got depressed about it, which is quite normal. And the amount of time it takes to do these things can be fairly quick, or it can be quite slow. And the thing around feeling loss is, as we go from denial to anger, frustration, and then maybe depression, which some of us experience in the depths of worst clinical depression, before it goes off the chart and down below, we're hoping that sometime soon, or eventually, we'll get to a place of acceptance around these events which have impacted on us. It could be people, places, or things. And I remember on my decline I was losing my house, my job, my career, my life. And so, feeling a loss, that denial initially, if it all went one way like that through time, and time going that way, it would be marvellous, because at least we would get through it once and we wouldn't have to go back and revisit it. But the problem is, when we're in denial about something and our self-esteem is being knocked, and that's our confidence to deal with the world. Denial, anger, frustration, we can go that way round the curve and down towards depression, or we might just spin out a bit like that and start to make new changes in our life. But the devil of feeling loss and grief is we go backwards as well, so we can always go back to the starting point. And then if it's just one event, we're maybe spiralling around this all the way, trying to make life make sense, and we keep going backwards and forwards. And the hope is that sometime we'll come that way towards acceptance, but it's just one event. And the problem with life is we just don't deal with one event at a time. I mean, it'd be very nice if we did, and then we could probably go through these feeling losses and get to acceptance. But what tends to happen is we have loss around an event, like it could be somebody going from our lives, and the denial, the anger, the frustration, and that depression is time sensitive. It depends how sensitive we are to what is going on and what is happening for us. So the depression part can be quite long, and the time could be in years or weeks or months, depending on the impact of the event that we're feeling loss around. So for me, during the 90s, or the end of the 90s, I was in denial about the loss of the big career I had. At the same time, having sworn off drink, I wasn't drinking, but anger, frustration and depression were there as well. I had a nervous breakdown. And that was after several other big events in my life. Back in the early 90s, my father died, and I went through this whole feeling loss process, going forwards and backwards as many times as it seemed to take. And at the same time, my partner, or the lady I saw as my partner at the time, left me, and in a very sad way. We were never able to reconnect again, and that's just the way it was. So I didn't just have one loss on one thing in the 90s, in the early 90s. I had another set of events as well. So it wasn't just one denial, it was denial of two things. I cannot believe my dad is dying, and I cannot believe my girlfriend's gone. And my way of dealing with that was to stay in denial and work like crazy in my career, and try and stay somewhere up here on this curve, so my self-esteem didn't go too low. But actually what happened was my self-esteem did go right down to the bottom where depression is, and I sort of put over the top of this a little thin creation called ego. And so my ego, my fear, my putting on a brave face, meant that people didn't see all this stuff going on for me. And the hardest thing is, when we've been told to put on a brave face, have a stiff upper lip, we never really learn how to deal with our feelings through time. And then when we have a whole catalogue of things, catastrophes hit us, we have no way of dealing with it. And for me, as the 1990s went on into the new millennium, the denial and the anger and the frustration and depression around loss of career, loss of one parent, sort of abated. But the problem was my ego and my putting on a brave face was supplemented by large amounts of alcohol, to the point where I was completely dependent and addicted. So all of this stuff was never really dealt with, and I lived in catastrophe and depression. And the worst of it was that I had actually got clinical depression, which is a chemical imbalance, not only caused by alcohol, but was always there or present in my life. So trying to get to acceptance in the late 2000 noughties, coming up to 2010 soon, has been a whole stream of events around loss of a girlfriend, loss of another girlfriend, loss of another girlfriend, and trying to get back a career which it was impossible to get back. And I didn't know that, so the denial around my life events, if you like, was very strong. So feeling loss is not easy, and the grieving process is really about expression of these things to other people, writing it, sharing it, getting it out there, and deal with small chunks of it, rather than trying to deal with not only one big loss, which we might experience, but life ain't like that. We have many of these things going on. So we can have denial there, another denial about something else, another denial further across, and another denial. So all these things we're trying to get out of, we get flattened and we can't cope. So what do? If you're an alcoholic like me, you probably go find a bottle of scotch, not my preferred one, maybe vodka, and life gets unmanageable. So these days what I do is go to a meeting of AA instead. But you know, we have to keep on grieving and getting it out and expressing it, so it's smaller and smaller chunks of stuff we're trying to deal with. And the gift is, as we get to acceptance, maybe our self-esteem comes back up. And if we're chemically out of balance because of our living, or we just didn't turn up to life with everything, then we need some help, and we get professional help. So that's a bit about loss. I don't know what to say besides that, other than it's the most painful of times, and it's not easy, because all this stuff, we can go right back again and do it all again for all the things we are grieving. It depends how we cope with life and how we move on. And we're best including ourselves in what is going on and expressing what is going on, so we may deal with it and we can get help. And that's enough, I think. I might have overrun. Anyway, that's where I'm at. Learning loss all over again in some respects.